So, open source AI, it's everywhere, isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, it seems like every day there's a new headline about some groundbreaking development or some
Right.
new company making waves.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely more than just hype at this point. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's really shaken up
It
the
is.
whole tech industry.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, I mean, one of the things that struck me as I was kind of diving into all of this
Yeah.
is this sort of tension between, this drive toward collaboration and sort of this
Mm.
urge to maintain control, right?
Yeah.
Like we've got these companies, Meta, Stability AI, Mistral AI, you know, they're all pushing for this open access approach.
Right.
But then, some of the big players,
Mhm.
including, I mean, ironically, OpenAI itself, seem
Yeah.
to be, becoming more guarded about their work.
Absolutely.
They
And,
should.
the name
Right.
OpenAI, kind of ironic
It is a bit ironic.
that they're
Yeah.
kind of shifting away
Yeah.
from that open approach.
Right.
But yeah, I think for them, they're probably thinking, hey, we've got to protect our innovations and investments.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
But, I'm curious, like, from your perspective, like, what's driving all of this enthusiasm for open source AI? Like, why are so many developers choosing this path?
Well, I think a big part of it is this kind of growing desire for transparency
Okay.
in AI development,
Yeah.
right? Like with open source models, you can actually see the code.
Right.
You can understand
Yeah.
how these algorithms are actually working, and you can even like spot potential problems, like security risks, things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then, on top of that, there's also just this really powerful
Mm-hmm.
collaborative spirit driving the whole movement.
Yeah.
It's like this feeling that we can achieve something truly remarkable by working together, sharing our knowledge.
Right. It's like a global think tank for AI, right?
Yeah.
Drawing on the expertise of, developers and researchers around the world.
Yeah. All over the place.
And that actually, brings us to some of the potential advantages of this whole open source approach,
Uh-huh.
right? So like I was reading, faster innovation, lower barriers to entry for startups, for researchers,
Yeah.
this ability to customize models, like all of these things sound pretty compelling on the surface.
Oh, they are. They are. And I mean, just think about this. Like one study actually found that code updates
Okay.
and bug fixes happen like twice as fast
Wow.
with open source projects compared to, the closed source ones.
Interesting.
So that speed, that agility is
Hmm.
really attractive to a lot of developers.
Right. It just makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you think about, like startups with limited resources.
Right.
Suddenly they have access to, cutting edge AI technology without needing massive funding.
Exactly. It really levels the playing field.
It does, especially you think about, innovators in different parts of the world that may not have
Traditionally had access to those kinds of resources.
Exactly. It's a game changer.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So we got all this excitement, right? But I mean, I have to ask, are there any reasons to be cautious?
Hmm.
Like, are there any potential downsides to this open source approach? Like any hidden traps we need to be aware of?
Well, it's true. Open source AI, it's got this immense potential, but there are definitely some valid concerns out there. Like
Gotcha.
one that I keep hearing over and over again is whether big tech companies are, using open source as this kind of strategic play
Right.
to ultimately kind of
Yeah.
dominate the market.
Right. Sort of like under the guise of
Yeah.
being collaborative, they're actually trying to like
Exactly.
corner the market.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
The idea is that by encouraging everyone to develop in the open, they can kind of benefit from
Right.
all the collective effort.
Right. To get all that research and development for free. Yeah. Yeah. And without having to invest as much themselves,
Yeah, it's a clever strategy if they can pull it off.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so that's one potential concern.
Uh-huh.
What else are people worried about?
Well, there's also this question of sustainability.
Okay.
A lot of open source projects rely heavily on volunteers,
Right.
right?
Right.
Which is great. I mean, that model can be incredibly effective.
Yeah.
But, it does make you wonder
Yeah.
about the long-term viability, especially as these AI projects are becoming more complex
Right.
and more resource intensive.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of people power.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't you argue though, like that
Yeah.
the very nature of open source with that global reach could actually attract a more diverse range of contributors, maybe even funding.
Yeah.
Like you could have organizations or even individuals who are just passionate about making AI accessible.
Right.
Step in and say, hey, we want to support this.
And we are starting to see some of that happening.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
But the whole question of sustainable funding for open source AI, I mean,
Yeah. It's a big one.
it's a big question mark.
Yeah, it's a huge debate.
Yeah.
And, speaking of navigating this whole complex landscape, I
Yeah.
mean, you were reading about those hybrid models, weren't you?
I was. And,
Like with Stability AI?
Stability AI.
Yeah, and their stable diffusion.
Yeah, and their stable diffusion image generator.
Yeah.
I found their approach really intriguing
Uh-huh.
because it seems like they've found a way to balance
Yeah.
contributing to the open source community while also, protecting their intellectual property
Right.
and still building a successful business.
Hmm. So tell me more about that. Like, how are they doing that?
Yeah, fill me in because it sounds kind of tricky.
Well, what they do
Yeah.
is they use this technique called model weighting.
Model weighting, a
So basically, they release this core.
open source model, right?
Yeah.
But then they also develop these like proprietary algorithms
Okay,
that
yeah.
kind of fine tune it
Okay.
and enhance its performance.
So they're kind of giving back to the community,
Right.
but then they're also like holding back a little bit of the secret sauce.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so it's like they're contributing to the ecosystem,
Hmm.
but they're also carving out their own little niche
Right.
in the market.
Exactly. Clever.
It's a clever strategy.
Yeah.
But it raises a really interesting question for like, startups and developers who are trying to figure out like, okay, where do we fit in this whole open source world?
Right.
Like, how do you leverage the benefits of open source
Mhm.
without, giving away your most valuable innovations?
Right. Yeah, that's the tightrope walk
It is.
that a lot of people are trying to figure out right now.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's only going to get
Yeah, it's a tough one. And it's only going to get more complicated
right.
as this whole thing keeps evolving.
Okay, so we've got all this incredible potential on one hand.
Yeah.
We've got some very real challenges on the other.
It's a mixed bag.
It is.
Yeah.
So what do you see? I mean, if you had to look into your crystal ball,
My crystal ball, okay.
yeah, what do you think the future of open source AI looks like? Any predictions?
Okay, well, if I had to guess,
Yeah.
I'd say we're going to see even more open source AI in the near future.
Okay.
I mean, it's too cost effective
Yeah.
and it's just too versatile for a lot of industries to ignore.
Right.
And I think we're also going to see a lot more of these community-driven projects, pushing the boundaries in all sorts of specialized areas.
Like what? Give me an example.
Like personalized medicine or environmental monitoring.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like that.
So really leveraging that collaborative spirit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about this hybrid model? Do you think that's going to like gain more traction?
I think so. I think as more and more companies are kind of wrestling with this balance
Right.
of contributing to open source, but also, protecting their own interests.
Yeah.
I think that hybrid approach is going to become even more popular.
Okay.
It's a good compromise, I think.
It is. It's a pragmatic solution.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're heading towards a future where open source AI is just like,
Everywhere.
yeah, like embedded in.
Yeah, woven into the fabric
Yeah.
of everything.
But, with this expanding influence,
Hmm.
do you think we're going to see like governments stepping in, like trying to regulate the space?
Well, I think it's almost inevitable. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because as open source AI gets more powerful and starts getting integrated in all these really critical systems,
Right.
governments are going to want to,
They're going to want to control it.
well, they're going to want to at least establish some ground rules, I think.
Yeah. Especially in areas like finance or, defense and stuff like that.
Right, where the stakes are really high.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're already seeing, like, the beginnings of those discussions happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag then.
It is.
But overall, it's a pretty fascinating and dynamic landscape.
Oh, yeah, it is.
All right, well, let's shift gears for a second and
Okay.
talk to our listeners.
Right.
Because, whether you're a developer, a
Right.
startup founder, or just someone who's, fascinated by the future of technology,
Right.
open source AI is going to impact your world in some way.
It is.
So let's get practical here. Like for all the developers out there listening,
Yeah.
should you be dedicating your time and your talents
Mhm.
to open source projects?
Mm-hmm.
Or should you be focusing on building, proprietary solutions? Like, what would you advise?
That is the $1,000,000 question.
It is.
Yeah, it's a tough one, Contributing to open source projects, it can be incredibly rewarding.
You get to be part of this global community
Hmm.
pushing the limits of AI, you know?
Right.
And the skills you learn, I mean, they're in high demand.
Yeah.
But, let's be real.
Hmm.
It can be hard to make a living
Yeah.
just from open source work,
Yeah.
especially when you're starting out.
So you're saying maybe a hybrid approach makes more sense?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, contributing to open source to kind of build your skills and reputation, but
Uh-huh.
then also developing some like specialized expertise
Mhm.
or even proprietary tools that
Yeah.
you can use to generate income.
Yeah, I think that's a smart move.
Okay.
It lets you participate in the open source world
Yeah.
while also creating a way to, you know, make a living.
Right. You got to pay the bills.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's for developers.
Right.
What about startup founders?
Well, for them, the big question is whether to build on existing open source AI or invest in developing their own models.
Right. That's a big decision.
It is. It is.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it really depends on their goals,
Okay.
what their industry needs,
Yeah.
and how much risk they're willing to take.
So like open source would be faster and cheaper.
Right. You can get up and running quickly,
Yeah.
but you might be limited in what you can do with it.
Right. Like customization,
Exactly.
differentiation, things like that.
Yeah, but if you build your own models, well, you've got more control,
Right.
and you might create something truly unique.
Yeah. Your own intellectual property.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it takes time and money,
Right. And expertise.
and expertise, yeah.
So it's a classic trade-off.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so what about bigger companies?
Well, for them, security is a huge issue. They
Okay.
need to make sure that any open source AI they use
Mm-hmm.
is safe and secure.
Right. To protect their data and systems.
Exactly.
And transparency is important too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like they need to be open with their customers about
Yeah.
how they're using AI.
Right, and how they're keeping everything safe and responsible.
So it seems like open source AI,
Mhm.
I mean, it has the potential to really change
Oh, yeah.
countless industries,
Absolutely.
healthcare, education, environmental conservation, like
All of them.
all of them.
Yeah, I mean, it could help us solve some of our biggest problems.
It could, it really could.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
But as with any new technology,
Mm-hmm.
there are things to think about,
Oh, definitely.
like complexities.
Yeah, it's not all sunshine and roses, right?
right, right.
There are definitely some challenges.
It's not a silver bullet.
No, not at all.
Okay, so open source AI,
Uh,
it's this powerful tool for progress,
yeah, I think so.
but we need to be careful with it
Right, we need to think about how we develop it,
Mhm.
how we use it, and how we govern it.
to make sure it's used for good.
Exactly.
And that actually brings us to our final thought for today.
Okay, shoot.
Imagine a world where AI is as accessible as the internet,
Wow.
fueled by this global community,
Mm-hmm.
constantly learning and growing.
Yeah, it's a powerful image.
Is this a utopia?
Or is it a recipe for disaster?
Right, right.
I mean, it's a question we all need to think about.
It is because the choices we make today,
Mhm.
they're going to shape the future of AI.
Yeah, I really will.
So stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged in this conversation.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, that's a really tough question. Contributing to open source projects, it can be incredibly rewarding. You get to be part of this global community, pushing the limits of AI, and the skills you learn, I mean, they're in high demand. But let's be real, it can be hard to make a living just from open source work, especially when you're starting out.
Yeah, so you're saying maybe a hybrid approach makes more sense.
Right. You contribute to open source to build your skills and reputation, but then also, develop some specialized expertise or even proprietary tools that you can use to generate income.
Yeah, okay, so it lets you participate in the open source world, but also still create a way to pay the bills.
Yeah.
All right, so that's developers. What about startup founders?
Well, for them, the big decision is whether to build on existing open source AI or invest in developing their own models.
Yeah, and that's a big decision, I imagine. Any thoughts on that?
It really depends. What are their goals? What does their industry need?
Yeah.
And how much risk are they willing to take?
So open source would be faster, cheaper to get started, but you might be limited in what you can do with it in terms of like customization and differentiation.
Exactly.
Whereas building your own models gives you more control, more potential for, unique intellectual property. But it takes a lot of time, money, expertise.
It does.
So it's a classic trade-off.
It is.
All right, so we've talked about developers, we've talked about startups. What about larger companies? Like, what are the considerations there?
Well, for them, security is a huge issue.
Mm.
They need to be really sure that any open source AI they're using is safe, to protect their data, their systems.
And transparency is important too, right?
Absolutely. They need to be open with their customers about how they're using AI, how they're keeping everything safe, responsible.
So it seems like open source AI, I mean, it has the potential to revolutionize so many industries. We're talking about healthcare, education, environmental conservation. Like, it could really help us solve some of the world's biggest
It
problems.
really could. It's a powerful tool for progress.
It is, but like with any new technology, there are complexities, things we need to be mindful of.
Yeah, for sure. It's not all sunshine and roses. We need to be careful, think about how we develop it, how we use it, and how we govern it to make sure that it's really used for good.
Absolutely. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive today. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. Imagine a future where AI is as accessible as the internet itself. It's constantly evolving, learning, adapting, fueled by this global community of contributors.
It's a powerful image.
It is. Is this a utopia or is it a recipe for disaster? The choices we make today, both individually and collectively, will shape the future of AI. So stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged in this conversation because it's one that's going to affect all of us.
That's right.